Honorable Senator Paul Fishers, Senator from Czech Republic, Honorable MP Paloma Dominguez Urgete, Member of Mexico City, Honorable Dilira Bayak, Vice President of Grand Council, Geneva, distinguished invitees, guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of Organizing Committee, I am very pleased to welcome you all to the Geneva Forum 2026, here at International Conference Center, Geneva. Over the next 2 days, we will have 4 panel discussions, 2 each day, as well as 1 special panel. We look forward to open, thoughtful, and meaningful discussion during the forums. We are honored to begin these opening sessions with welcome address by representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Office of Tibet, Geneva. I may invite Ms. Tinli Chukila to deliver a welcome speech.
Paying my obeisance to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, honorable parliamentarians, members from the Tibet support groups, mandate holders, UN staffers, representatives of international organizations, civil society, academia, and media, dear guests and friends. I, on behalf of the Tibet Bureau Geneva and on behalf of the Minister for Information and International Relations, Mrs. Norzin Dolma, who could not be here today because of her prior work commitments, feel very proud and honored to welcome you all to the Geneva Forum 2026. As a host, I am deeply grateful for your presence here today and the commitment it represents. We gather in Geneva not because of a coincidence, but because of conviction. Geneva remains the international city for the international human rights. And what makes this forum even more powerful is because of the diversity of voices it represents and present here today in this room. We are honored to have participants today from 25 countries, from all the 7 continents, except, I think, Antarctica. So, you come from different walks of life, different political traditions, different legal systems, and different lived experiences. But what makes this gathering even more special is because you value the human rights, you value the global order, and more importantly, you share the solidarity of those who are affected by the human rights violations. The Geneva Forum was created precisely for this kind of a forum and platform, a space where evidence-based analysis meets lived experience, where the findings of the UN mechanisms are amplified and not ignored, and where the voices and the victims of the human rights violations are spoken with and not just about. This year's forum takes place at a very critical moment because what we are witnessing today in regions under the People's Republic of China, including in Tibet, Uyghur and Mongolian region, is egregious human rights violations. We, as we speak today, are witnessing more than 1 million Tibetan children being subjected to forced residential schools. We, as we speak today, are witnessing more than 1 million Tibetans, Uyghurs being subjected to forced labor camps and concentration camps. We, as we speak today, are witnessing historic violations and silent annihilation of the Tibetan civilization. And at this juncture, it becomes even more important that we gather here today to talk on the theme of repression and resilience. Repression which seeks to silence, and resilience which endures which endures through preservation of language, culture, and religion. And therefore, over the 2 days, as my colleague has very distinctly informed you, we will talk on uncovering the violations of human rights across the regions in China, and of course, in terms of transnational repression, how the violations are not just within the borders, but are also transgressing the international borders. We will also explore avenues on how international advocacy can be built and how we can ensure that the voices of the affected are heard. And to inaugurate this August gathering, as my colleague has very distinctly introduced, we have a very honorable and privileged inaugural panel, including, of course, Sikyong, President of the Central Tibetan Administration, a longtime friend and strong advocate, Parliamentary Secretary State to the German Bundestag, Honorable Michael Brandt, a very strong advocate for human rights in Tibet and across China, Senator Pavel Fischer, from the host country, of course, and a member of the Swiss Parliamentary Group for Tibet, Parliamentarian Laurence. Another host person who is joining us today, the Vice President of the Geneva Canton, Madame Dilara Berak, and all the way from Mexico, Parliamentarian Paloma Ugarte, who brings renewed commitment to human rights and peace world over. Before I hand over to the privileged panel, may I take a time to acknowledge our donors and funders who have supported this forum and also who stood by Central Tibetan Administration through ups and downs. I thank them for not only supporting us, but also, as you may see in your bags, which was given as a commemorative of the 90th birthday of His Holiness, we have 2 books in your bags. One, the biography of His Holiness, the latest updated version released from the Tibet Museum, and also the latest autobiography of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Voice for the Voiceless. We also today have exhibition, both today and tomorrow, exhibition on 2 important matters. One, mapping Tibet, and second, the biography of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So, not taking much time, may I please close this panel and, my talk, with the words of His Holiness. Never give up. No matter what is happening around you, never give up. We cannot give up. Thank you so much for your time and commitment.
Thank you, Tilechukila. It is now my honor to invite Honorable Dilara Berak, Vice President of Grand Council of Geneva.
So thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here today. I would like to first introduce and say that I will only be speaking on my behalf because the Geneva Parliament didn't want to be represented by my means. But you know what? I have been involved with human rights for a long time, so I will carry that burden with great honor. Again, it fills me with pride that the Geneva Forum is taking place here in Geneva. The Geneva Canton is, of course, very well known for its battle for human rights, and I think that resilience can be celebrated here in this forum. I am also very happy to see that a lot of people came, because I understand that it is very complicated in the current climate here, let it be in the US or in the United Nations, that it's very difficult. It's not a very sexy topic anymore to defend human rights, and to see so many people still coming and being proud to help the cause is very, very making me happy. I would like to say that my first introduction to the topic of human rights, especially in Geneva, but also in Tibet, was made through the Uyghur cause, because we have this international film festival here in Geneva, and when I was 15, I've seen a documentary on the Uyghur population, and I've never heard of it before. So in Switzerland, we do not learn these things in school, and I've been very touched. And since then, you know, it's a red string where you pull apart, and you see all these regions that are under the Chinese administration and that are suffering from not living life as they should, freely and openly, without any persecution. What I would like to say furthermore is that through your involvement and presence here, you're giving a space to these causes, all the people that do not have a voice, that are voiceless. And as advocates, we have the duty to be the voices of the voiceless, and I'm very happy that all of the people here contribute to the involvement and to the resilience, to the shared fight against persecution. Again, maybe if you don't know, in Switzerland, politicians do not only do politics, we also have a job next to it, because it's the way the system works. In my free time, I'm a lawyer, and as a lawyer, I can see that the human rights violations are perpetrated without any sanction, and this is something that should really disturb our sense of justice. This is why your presence here is very, very welcomed, and I thank you again for the effort that takes to defend human rights. Let it be for the Tibetan rights, for the Uyghur rights, but also even in Switzerland, all the human rights violation that we see, because we also have human rights violation in Switzerland. This is not something we are proud of, but obviously we also have that here. So through our advocacy for human rights, I invite you all of you to be the voice for the voiceless, and to continue your involvement in favor of human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for your thoughtful address. Now it's an honor to invite distinguished member of Swiss Parliament representing the Canton of Geneva to deliver the opening address. May I invite Honorable Lawrence Reils, member of National Council of Switzerland.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, Tashidele, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your invitation, and I am very honored to address a few words to you at the opening of this forum. And I am also speaking on behalf of the Parliamentary Group of Friendship with Tibet. This forum takes place at a particularly challenging time, and I'm also very proud that it's taking place in Geneva. You know, the ecosystem of the Geneva organizations is a bit not at ease at the moment, and it is very important then to see so many people also fighting and struggling for freedom and for the human rights, in particularly for the human rights of Tibetan people. So the values of multilateralism and international humanitarian law are increasingly being questioned, and ongoing conflicts risk overshadowing all the struggles that had yet not found a just and lasting solution, like the issue of Tibet. The Parliamentary Group of Friendship with Tibet has the privilege of maintaining regular and close relations with the Office of Tibet, as well as with representatives of Tibetan organizations here in Switzerland. We are grateful for the support of the Secretariat led by Mr. Thomas Büchli, who is here, which plays a key role in organizing events and strengthening the ties between our parliamentary groups and the Tibetan civil society. Last year, 3 of my colleagues in the Parliament, Leonor Porchet, Fabian Molina, and Lida de Ventura, traveled to Dharamsala to meet with the Tibetan government in exile and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I myself had the honor of welcoming His Eminence Kundalini Tatsak Rinpoche at the Federal Palace in October 25. These meaningful interactions allow us to better understand the situation of the Tibetan people and their needs. They also enable us to express our solidarity with the people who have been denied for far too long the right to live freely and in accordance with their own laws, culture, and traditions. As parliamentarians, we also have responsibility to raise concerns and to bring the voice and needs of the Tibetan people to the Parliament and to the Federal Council. As maybe I can use the word of Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader in Burma, who said, "Use your freedom to promote ours." And I think it fits also with the issue of Tibetan. In this context, the Foreign Affairs Committee on the National Council submitted a postulate calling for a detailed report on the situation of Tibetans in Switzerland, with particular attention to freedom of expression and surveillance. In response, the Federal Council published a report in 2025 based on a scientific study conducted by Professor Ralph Weber on the University of Basel. I think he is here. I just have the pleasure to meet him just before, and he will also explain more about his studying in the panel tomorrow. The conclusions of this report are clear and deeply concerning. Members of the Tibetan and Uyghur diasporas in Switzerland are subject to surveillance, intimidation, and pressure by agents of the People's Republic of China. In some cases, they are coerced into monitoring other members of their communities under threat to their family members living in China. The Weber report highlights another major objective of the Chinese authorities: to discourage Tibetans and Uyghurs living in Switzerland from acting in politics. To this end, the Chinese authorities notably launched cyber attacks, for instance. Furthermore, there is suspicion that the communication of Tibetans and Uyghurs living in Switzerland are being monitored. The sources of the Weber report confirm that it is known fact that Tibetans and Uyghurs who expose themselves are systematically observed and photographed in Switzerland. The report, this time the one of the government, therefore recommends concrete measures to protect these communities and to address the issue of transnational repression within the framework of Switzerland human rights dialogue with the Chinese authorities. But of course, as I heard, these measures are a bit disappointing. They are not strong enough. So it will be the responsibility to the Parliament group on Tibet to ensure that these recommendations are followed through and more and more. Several members of our group sit on the Foreign Affairs committees, and we will closely monitor the implementation of these measures, and we wait for greater determination expected from the Federal Council, that means our government. I also want to emphasize environmental issues which must also be addressed with the utmost attention. Too little is known about what is often referred to as the third pole, including the Tibetan Plateau and the Himalayas. This region contains the largest reserve of glaciers outside the Arctic and Antarctic and provides water for between 1.5 and 2 billion people. The stakes could not be higher. The waters of Tibet are crucial to food security across many Asian countries. Yet, short-term economic priorities threaten this fragile environment balance. Intensive dam construction, mining activities, infrastructure development, and soil pollution are placing Tibet and neighboring regions at serious risk. The question of the reincarnation and succession of the Dalai Lama is also a thorny issue. Our parliamentary group shares the view that the Tibetan people have the right to determine the reincarnation of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, according to their own tradition, without foreign interference. Tibetans and their representatives in the diaspora continue to face immense challenges in defending their fundamental rights, in pursuing their aspiration for self-determination, and resisting the pressures they experience even in their host countries, including Switzerland. They can count on our solidarity. I wish you constructive and fruitful discussion during these 2 days. The Parliamentary Group of Friendship with Tibet will continue to convey the concerns of Tibetan people to the federal parliament and to the Swiss government. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. We are now pleased to hear from respected parliamentary from Mexico, who has been actively engaged in public service and legislative leadership. May I invite the honorable member of Mexico, Ms. Palamo Ugarte.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Honorable guests, distinguished experts, representatives of international institutions, and colleagues. It is an honor to address this forum in a city that symbolizes multilateralism, dialogue, and the enduring commitment of the international community to the protection of human dignity. I sincerely thank the Tibet Bureau for inviting me to this 6th Geneva Forum and for creating a space where evidence, international law, and lived experience meet. Human rights are not granted by power, nor suspended by convenience. They are universal obligations, freely undertaken by states and measured not by rhetoric, but by practice. When freedom of religion or belief is restricted, cultural rights are weakened. When language and education are controlled, family life and identity suffer. When expression is silenced, accountability erodes. This interconnectedness is precisely why the international human rights framework exists, and why those of us entrusted with public responsibility have an ethical and political obligation to defend, promote, and uphold human rights at home and in the international arena. Today, the forum rightly focuses on regions under the governance of the People's Republic of China, including Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Hong Kong, and others. Across these regions, UN special procedures have documented consistent patterns: shrinking civic space, extensive surveillance, administrative control over cultural and religious life, and restrictions on peaceful expression. As a committed Christian, I understand the importance of religious freedom for the flourishing of societies. But this conviction is not uniquely Christian. It is reflected in international human rights law, which protects freedom of religion or belief, precisely because pluralism, conscience, and dignity are foundations of peaceful coexistence. From that perspective, what is at stake in Tibet is autonomy of conscience. When a state claims authority to regulate religious belief or to control spiritual institutions, it violates a core human right. In this context, the international community is aware of a well-documented case concerning the recognition of a religious successor in Tibet that was rejected by state authorities. The child identified through that religious process subsequently disappeared and has not been seen publicly since, while an alternative figure was installed through an imposed procedure. I strongly believe that religious succession must be determined by religious communities themselves, free from political coercion. Anything less empties religious freedom of its meaning. Beyond religion and culture, Tibet also matters because of its global environmental significance. Often described as the third pole, the Tibetan Plateau is the largest and highest plateau on Earth. It contains the greatest reserve of ice outside the polar regions and is the source of Asia's major rivers, supporting the lives and livelihoods of more than 1 billion people downstream, as it was mentioned here before. Policies affecting Tibet's environment are issues of climate stability, water security, and intergenerational justice. Environmental degradation in Tibet does not stop at borders. From Mexico, we recognize that Tibetan representatives have consistently articulated peaceful and non-violent proposals for resolving their situation. Most notably, the Middle Way approach seeks genuine autonomy for Tibetans within the framework of the People's Republic of China, explicitly rejecting independence and emphasizing dialogue, mutual benefit, and respect for China's territorial integrity. This approach demonstrates a sustained commitment to nonviolence, principled pragmatism, and engagement, values fully aligned with the purposes of the United Nations. As a legislator, I speak with humility as well as conviction. My own country, Mexico, has made significant progress in the constitutional recognition of human rights. Yet we continue to face serious challenges in implementation, including violence, disappearances, and risks faced by journalists and human rights defenders. This is precisely why international mechanisms matter. Oversight, dialogue, and cooperation do not weaken sovereignty, but strengthen legitimacy. As parliamentarians, we have a particular responsibility in this regard, to legislate in line with international commitments, to oversee executive power, and to give voice to those who are too often unheard. As Secretary of the Human Rights Commission of the Mexican Chamber of Deputies, I reaffirm my commitment to promoting legal frameworks that strengthen the protection of human rights, to fostering international dialogue, and to speaking out whenever these rights are threatened, regardless of where such violations occur. Defending human rights requires coherence, courage, and perseverance. Silence in the face of documented human rights violations is never neutral. Forums such as this one play a vital role in ensuring that evidence informs policy, that law guides diplomacy, and that human dignity remains at the center of international engagement. May our discussions here today contribute to that shared responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Ugarte. Our next speaker is senior legislator from Czech Republic, well known for his commitment to democratic values and international cooperation. Please welcome Honorable Senator Pavel Fischers.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Repression and resilience, human rights in Tibetan regions under China. This is the topic of this year's Geneva Forum, and I am very honored and proud to be part of your gathering. When I prepared my notes, I realized that we face many challenges these days. Today, China sentenced for 20 years of prison Jimmy Lai, 78-year-old man. By doing so, PRC shows once again how dismantling Hong Kong freedoms might look like. This is not a justice. This is a criminalization of peaceful dissent. And this is also a failure of international community to enforce Sino-British agreement, which stated so clearly that there is an independence of different powers within Hong Kong for years to come. Beijing is dismantling the rule of law, and the world spoke out but failed to act. In the meantime, many leaders visited China. Recently, the French President Macron in December 25, Prime Minister of Finland in January 26, Irish Prime Minister, United Kingdom Prime Minister, Canada Prime Minister, who signed even a paper on strategic partnership with People's Republic of China. Even though these issues are not self-evident, we have still a choice. We see it in Europe, where we are not isolated from the world. And for instance, in struggling how to preserve our digital autonomy and how to meet the challenge of artificial intelligence these days, we see how complex the geopolitical situation might be. The artificial intelligence challenge the independence of academia, critical thinking, and freedom of research if we realize that these artificial tools might be created for the purpose of the Communist Party in China. If we speak about artificial intelligence, this is not only about efficiency. This tool becomes a part of critical infrastructure of our societies. And it is only up to us if we create geopolitical dependency, where freedom of research is stifled, and when we realize, maybe too late, that the analytical tools were created by engineers who listen only to the interest of foreign powers or to the guidelines of the Communist Party. AI is a black box, and if algorithms are ruled by principles of an authoritarian state, we should be extremely cautious. Yes, we have a choice, be it intellectual surrender, resignation, submission, or abandon, or on the other side, we can make a choice in favor of autonomy, of independence, of self-determination, and of liberty. Speaking about the challenges of our time might be very beneficial for all of us, because by critically thinking about challenges we face, we can vaccinate ourselves and strengthen our immunity. In the free world, we observe some ideological currents and ideas that prefer to run a country like a private corporation, to replace citizens' rights by user agreement you never read. Artificial intelligence coaching might be programmed to make you stop asking difficult questions. And if we see that in some countries, the head of states behave like CEOs, ruling the country beyond any constraints of democracy, we should be attentive. Yes, as we speak about human rights and international justice, we should be revolted by the fact that in some countries, international court judges are treated like terrorists. We will not protect our sovereignty if we sabotage the justice. And if we consider justice to be only the rule of the powerful and mightful, we might lose from the sight that the equality before the law is something extremely precious that the free democratic countries were based on. And if we take into consideration that on many universities the critical thinking was replaced by a docility or by repeating ideological narratives, we see that we are part of the problem and we might be part of the solution if we act appropriately. Yes, in this world, doing the advocacy work is extremely challenging. But you have many friends, not only you Tibetans, but all other oppressed people. If we do not realize that China is moving and changing, we will not realize how difficult our task is. In fact, China moved from defensive to offensive posture within United Nations, injecting party ideals or party agenda into the international system to insulate itself from any future scrutiny and criticism. If we see how the United Nations periodical review of human rights is organized, we assist on a script performance where Beijing coordinates with friendly states to drown out real criticism with repetitive congratulatory questions, leaving aside forced labor camps and many injustices that we know about. Yes, People's Republic of China uses the UN as a shield for impunity while trying to delete cultural DNA of Tibet. I'm convinced that these challenges are not only political ones, but spiritual struggle also. And here, the spiritual and cultural legacy of Tibet can help us also to realize that the Tibet resilience is also one of the ultimate stress tests for global justice, for humanity, and that we have to join forces to succeed. If we do not want a future of modern slavery to be written right now, we can act in favor of a world where freedom might be a default setting. And as my predecessor just quoted His Holiness Dalai Lama, we can never give up. We can become voice for the voiceless. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. Now, invite respected member of German Bundestag, recognized for his leaderships on international humanitarian and human rights issues. It's my great honor to invite Honorable Michel Brands, Member of Parliament from Germany.
So, dear friends from Tibet, distinguished dignitaries, dear guests and observers of this very special event, dear Sikyong. It's my honor, it's my privilege and responsibility to address this distinguished audience in a time of fundamental changes in the global dimension. We all can see, hear, read, and even feel how fast our world is changing. Not only a few people, in not only a few regions on this small planet are insecure, even afraid in the light of these fundamental shifts. But as people who are grounded in convictions, led by our religious beliefs, aware that we are not alone in this planet, we know some good forces are watching over us in these insecure times. So it's a key element of an address like mine, on an occasion like this, that I have the honor to remind all of you and all of us that an authority of global reach for the hearts and minds and even for the souls of so many people on this planet is in the center of our thoughts today. Of course, I'm speaking of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. When we talk about fundamental shifts in our current era, we are focused on increasing dangers in the coming months and years and decades. But in the light of the impressively long history of a nation like the Tibetan nation, that might be just a glimpse. Still, the Tibetan people are facing dangers like maybe never before. And we have to talk about this. We have to raise global awareness again. The world could see how much the Chinese regime is under threat from within. The breathtaking development in Beijing, where the repressive supreme leader had his childhood friend and commander of the armed forces, the PLA, arrested, sent shockwaves throughout China and the region and even the globe. No one can argue that the Chinese regime would be stable and safe. But that is not to say that the Tibetan nation would be safer. On the contrary, insecure regimes that are under pressure from within by competing factions within the regime, they often try to distract from internal problems by aggressive actions toward the outside world. And there's no doubt that for China, the Tibetan nation, the Tibetan culture, the Tibetan history, and also the Tibetan land is basically outside world. Because despite all the propaganda from the Communist Party, that deeply rooted, that peaceful culture of the Tibetan nation is just the opposite of that racist, aggressive, and even more repressive Han Chinese Communist regime. Therefore, we have to raise awareness around the globe that the precious Tibetan culture, unique and of immense importance for the whole world, is under increasing threat. There's no need here in this room to address all the various brutal measures and actions by the CCP that have only one goal in general, namely to extinct this world heritage of Tibetan culture, language and nation, and to replace it by the ugly repressive regime that the communists in China wants to spread in the country, the neighborhood and even around the globe. Therefore, we have to continue to fight for the world to know a clear picture about what is going on in Tibet. Therefore, we have to disrupt and dismantle that wall, that Chinese wall of imprisonment for the Tibetan nation. Therefore, we have to spread the news, the ugly and sad news about the hundreds of thousands of children being forced into and Chinese indoctrination, separated from their parents and their families, only to cut the roots of this precious Tibetan language and to tear in pieces the Tibetan heritage. So I'm happy to see Dr. Gayalo, who was writing and talking about that. But in all crises, there's always a chance. There's even hope for a better future. Here is what all of us together with other friends of the great Tibetan nation all over the world can do and should do. Since the regime of Xi Jinping is posing an ever greater threat of even war inside the region, not only against Taiwan, but moreover against other independent countries and nations, we have to show that the Tibetan nation has been the training ground for these repressive patterns. The world has to see that if you do not tackle the dragon at the beginning, you might end up in fire and destruction. The case of Tibet has become a litmus test for major and medium powers on the globe and in the region on how to deal with an ever more aggressive, ruthless, and yes, barbarian CCP. They do not share our values. They do not share our view that every life is precious. They do not share a view of culture, of heritage, and of togetherness of the people around the world. Therefore, we have a real voice in this very moment of human history. Therefore, we have to raise our voices and have to address the danger, the barbarism imposing for our common human civilization. Therefore, I'm not naive, but hopeful that the world will come together in defending human civilization. So let me close with an appeal to all of us and to the wider world. Let us stand up for civilization, for culture, for humankind, and for humanity and kindness, like His Holiness has done it throughout his outstanding life. Let us stand up against the forces of evil, of destruction, and against brutality and inhumanity. And let us work for the day when we will all be exhausted but victorious. The day when we will have pushed back successfully the forces of evil. The day when humanity and civilization will have prevailed. That will be the day when the precious and proud Tibetan nation, when Tibet will be free again. If we stay together, if we find together, I'm convinced that day will come and we will all be blessed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable MP Michel Brandt. Distinguished guests, we are now come to the keynote address of the opening panel. It is my great honor to invite Honorable Sikyong Penpa Tsering, President of Central Tibetan Administration, to deliver the keynote address to Geneva Forum.
You must be wondering why I am carrying such a thick book here. It's not for my biceps. It's history of Tibet. Before, of course, I speak on the subject today, it's my honor and privilege to be sharing this dais with our old friends, Senator Paul Fischel, Michel Brandt. We keep meeting every now and then, and we keep going back to Czech Republic all the time. And Michel has now become a parliamentary state secretary in his official government position. I think this is the first time that we have a representation from the government of Germany. And then we have friends from Switzerland and Mexico. I was in Mexico a few months ago, but I didn't get to meet Paloma and her husband. But then the world is so small. Now we meet here in Geneva. So thank you for coming all the way from Mexico. And all our friends here whom I have met at different places in your own country or in Dharamsala or in different platforms. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time, including our friend here, ambassador of the Taiwanese government here in Switzerland. So a very warm welcome. Thank you for coming. Your coming here itself expresses your support for the Tibetan people, not just for the Tibetan people. I'm sure many of you support all the repressed people around the world. Now, the reason why I'm carrying this book is because of the subject, repression and resilience. Of course, there will be a lot more sessions on how repressive the Chinese government is. And we always, here in Geneva, this Geneva Forum was created because there's no space for people like Tibetans, and we have a lot of representation here for the Onpo, who are also not represented. So our voices are not heard. The last time I was here, I said we are very skeptical of the United Nations. I've also said that the United Nations is one of the most undemocratic institutions in the world, maybe next to FIFA. So now I echo all the things that Senator Powell, Michel, and our friends on the dais already said about the turbulent times that we live in. Maybe this is a precursor to change the structure of the United Nations once the global order settles down so that their voices could be heard, particularly from people who are repressed, who are voiceless. These multilateral institutions should be places where everybody has a right to say about what's happening to them or to their country or to their people. Now, I've always said Tibet was an independent nation. Today, Tibet is an occupied country. And the kind of repression that we see, not only in Tibet, but also to our friends in East Turkestan or Inner Mongolia, our Hong Konger friends, friends in Taiwan, all of us are facing a lot of trouble from China. The resilience of the Tibetan people is rooted in its history. We were independent and we have a widely accepted history of 2,200 years. Till communist China invaded Tibet, Tibet was an independent nation. That's why I'm carrying this book. Because I was just coming back from Washington, D.C., and this book was launched in D.C. on 29th of last month. And this is written by a Chinese professor, Professor Lau Hanxiang. Last time when I came here, we talked about, 2 years ago, we talked about Michael Van Wall's book called Tibet Brief 2022, which looked at Tibetan history from an international legal perspective of the form of nation-state before the end of Second World War and the formation of United Nations and definition of modern nation-state. Every region in this world have its own definition of sovereignty those days. Michael Van Wall looked at those angles, working with some 70, 80 scholars from Central Asia, not just from Tibet. And also, since the formation of United Nations, the definition of modern nation-state, Michael proves that according to international law, Tibet has never been considered part of China. And this book by Professor Lau is based on Chinese imperial historical records. He had 3 criterions, and 2 most important ones are that all his documents or evidence should have been based on documents that were published before 1949, which means before the coming in of Communist Party. And if it's documents that were printed after 1949, that should have been printed by the Communist Party of China. So all the documents that he refers to here are irrefutable evidence based on imperial Chinese historical records, particularly the Tsering. But we didn't have much relations with the Mings from 1368 to 1644. Mongols, we had relations with Mongols much before Mongolia invaded China. So this book is thick. Of course, we'll try to come out with a concise version later. It is about 1,300 pages, and it's going to be a very, very important reference book. The Chinese version came out in 2019. And the Tibetan version was done by our Chinese liaison officer who's based here in Geneva right now. He did it voluntarily. And the English version took about 3 days because Professor Lau says that I'm challenging the Chinese government and I don't want a single mistake in this book. So anybody who is interested in Tibet should be reading this, but it's quite thick. And we'll try to come out with a... So what we have been trying to do on this is we are very committed. Of course, you will be discussing about the details of human rights violations inside Tibet, but I will do a general, because we have been independent. Between 7th to 9th century, Tibetan Empire was one of the biggest in Central Asia. We even captured the capital of Tibet, put in a puppet emperor. There's no voice? Culturally. Disruption again. Is it Chinese intervention? No. So then between 7th to 9th century, because we are talking about resilience, I am talking about history. Our resilience is rooted in our history, in our culture, in our religion. So that's why I'm covering a little bit of that. So from a historical point of view, Tibet has been an independent nation till Communist China invaded Tibet. So from 7th to 9th, Tibet was a powerful empire in the region. We captured the capital of China, put in a puppet emperor for a short while. We even went up to Uzbekistan, or Samarkand in the present-day Uzbekistan. That used to be the extended Tibetan Empire at one time. Then Tibet disintegrated for about 400 years. But then, before this empireship, the Tibetan script came from India. These are small details that need to be known to them, because sometimes we are asked, oh, since Tibet is occupied by China, does Tibetan language have something to do with Chinese or not? I say, no, Tibetan language is completely different. The Tibetan script came from the Indian Devanagari script in 7th century. Then in 8th century, Buddhism was introduced in Tibet by Indian masters, not Chinese masters. And then since then, we have been following Buddhism. I say we are devout Buddhists for the last more than 1,300 years. Even during the 400 years of disintegration, the religious revivalism inside Tibet took a huge leap. That's why we have different traditions now in Tibet. Then by 13th century, beginning of end of 12th century, 13th century, Mongols became a big empire in that region. And we developed relations with the Mongols even before Mongolia invaded China. Today, our Mongolian friends say, it's you Tibetans who turned us into Buddhists, otherwise we were warriors at one time. So Mongolians follow Tibetan Buddhism today because of our relationship with them. Then we had our own, even during the Mongols, our relations with the Mongols are more than 4 centuries, from 13th to 17th, 18th century, up to 1720. We didn't have much to do with the Chinese. The Ming Chinese, ruled by Han Chinese, there was no much historical relation between China and Tibet between 1368 to 1644. Then, of course, in 1642, the 5th Dalai Lama took over the temporal and spiritual leadership of Tibet, and successive Dalai Lamas ruled Tibet, and China has its own Qing dynasty, which are Manchus, not Chinese. That's why last time also I said, if you watch Chinese Kung Fu movies, you will realize that all the protagonists in these movies are all Chinese, all the antagonists are all Manchus, because from the societal perspective of the Chinese people, Manchus are not Chinese. So that's where we stand. And some historians say, oh, from 1913 onwards, Tibet seemed to have all the characteristics of an independent state. It's not the case. We were independent. Till Chinese communists came in, we were an independent nation, and that's what we have been trying to do. We follow the middle way policy to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict, as proposed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and unanimously supported by the Parliament, and His Holiness reiterated this position. We continue to follow the same. When we say middle, it's a Buddhist concept. And when His Holiness talks about the middle way, then we know that there are ends to it. Without ends, there cannot be middle. So when His Holiness says he's asking for middle way, he's asking for genuine autonomy, which is not a political term, but this is His Holiness' genuine expression of what he wants, because China already calls Tibet, Tibet Autonomous Region, Tibet Autonomous Prefecture, Tibet Autonomous County. They also acknowledge that in all the 3 provinces of Tibet, it's the Tibetan people who live there, who inhabit. And according to the law on national regional autonomy, people who live in a contiguous territory have the right to autonomy. And this might change. I think this is something that we need to watch during the March session in China, where they might do away with this law for nationalities, which is going to be a huge reset for Tibet. And we'll have to reevaluate all our situation based on what China is trying to do to change the status quo into a position that is more favorable for China to integrate all the nationalities into China. So from a historical point of view, we have been trying to reach out. We worked with the US government, Congress, for 2 years to get the Resolve Tibet Act. Last July, President Biden signed it into law. And this law, because China says that there is no Tibet problem, and this law says that Tibet is yet to be resolved dispute. It needs to be resolved under international law. And this law also talks about the right to self-determination of the Tibetan people, which is very much in line with the 1961 General Assembly resolution on Tibet, UN General Assembly resolution on Tibet. So, and this law also talks about countering China's false narrative on Tibetan history, because China keeps saying Tibet has been part of China since ancient times or antiquity. That is why this book is important, Professor Lau's book, that Tibet was never part of China since antiquity, because Lao, being a Chinese, when he was in school, they used to teach that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. And when he was in his universities, he found that the communist government is asking every other government to say Tibet is part of People's Republic of China. So as a Chinese, he was intrigued by this position. And when he became a professor all his life, and after his retirement, to fulfill his inquisitiveness, he started looking at Chinese imperial historical records. And he came out with this book, which is invaluable for us, and which is the truth. So this is one area we're trying to work from the CTA's point of view, the Tibetan government's, and I'm happy to inform you that in the latest 2026 appropriation bill of the United States, they have mentioned for the first time a new language that for the purpose of this act, that is the spending bill, the appropriation, the Central Tibetan administration would be considered the Tibetan government in exile. So this language has been inserted for the first time, and for us, this is one step forward. And then we'll have to take it forward with more legislation on legitimization of the Central Tibetan administration. So these are one area that we are moving, and a lot of Tibet supporters are here. Now we have to do this in Europe as well, and all the friendly countries that we are involved with, particularly in the free world, because we can't reach out to the authoritarian regimes. The other area, our Honorable Member Lawrence mentioned about His Holiness reincarnation. This is one area that we have been working. You know that we celebrated His Holiness 90th birthday last July, and His Holiness came out with a statement on July 2nd about His Holiness reincarnation, which makes it clear that there will be continuation of the Ganden Phodan Trust of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that there will be a next Dalai Lama, and the responsibility of choosing the next Dalai Lama will lie with the Ganden Phodan Trust of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in consultation with High Lamas of other traditions and oracles who have been associated with successive Dalai Lamas. So those have been made clear, but again, His Holiness has not specified whether it could be an emanation or reincarnation in future. Many people don't understand the system. If it is going to be reincarnation, then all divinations or, the messages that His Holiness leave will happen only before his demise, not 20 years. His Holiness keeps saying, I'll live for another 2 decades and more. And I keep telling the Chinese, this message is for you, because you're waiting for this Dalai Lama to die. They are not concerned about the living 14th, but they are more concerned about the 15th, because they know that they can use it for their political gain. So that is what we have been doing. Is the first community that gets impacted by His Holiness reincarnation is the Tibetan community. And His Holiness has been very consistent in his statement since 1968 that whether there should be a next Dalai Lama or not will be decided by the Tibetan people. And this is exactly what happened, because the Tibetans inside cannot express their wishes, so the Tibetans in diaspora wrote to His Holiness about what they want, and then His Holiness came out with this July 2nd statement. And we have been reaching out to the larger Tibetan Buddhist world in the Himalayas and to Mongolia and other countries who follow Tibetan Buddhism. And then we reached out to the larger Buddhist community around the world, and they have been very supportive all around. And then, of course, we reached out to governments. The United States already have a law, which was signed into law by President Trump in 2020, when during his first presidency, this was the Tibet Support and Policy Act, amendment to the 2002 policy, U.S. Tibet Policy Act. So from there, we got this Resolve Tibet Act. Now we are going to, on the reincarnation part, U.S. in the 2020 Tibet Support and Policy Act, they have included this element of His Holiness reincarnation, including sanctioning of Chinese officials who would be responsible for doing these things in China when the time comes. So these are some of the initiatives. Then we reached out to UK, we reached out to Germany, and we were told they committed to issuing a statement, and they said they were in discussion with France. And July 6th of last year, Germany, UK, France, Holland, Iceland, Estonia, and Lithuania the human rights commissioners of these countries, ambassadors of these countries, came out with a joint statement on July 6th. And I'm also grateful to the Czech president, Peter Pavel, for the first time a sitting president, of course, the President Václav Havel was the first to invite a sitting president to invite His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Czech Republic. That also enhanced the visibility of His Holiness' work. And last year, President Peter Pavel came to Ladakh, a sitting president coming to India for the first time to meet with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And President Pavel also hosted this Alliance 18 Conference of Religious Freedom in Czech Republic at the Presidential Palace of the Czech Republic, and he himself came and addressed the conference. And we were fortunate to have Ambassador Robert Rehak to focus on Tibet during that conference, and I also got an opportunity to speak there. And based on our appeal, the Article Alliance Conference came out with a statement on the freedom of religious belief of the Tibetan people and the Tibetan people's right to choose their reincarnation. So these are some of the efforts that we have been making, and these are very, very important for us, because the Article 18 Alliance here consists of about 38 members and 5 associated members and 3 observer members. So the support from all these countries, from the free world, as to what they want to see regarding His Holiness reincarnation has been very, very powerful statements coming from these countries. So these are some of the efforts that we have been making. And when we say all our efforts has to be in that direction, then all our friends, supporters in different countries, particularly in Europe, I think we have to now work much more stronger. I have always been saying the Europeans need to come together with a common trade policy or a foreign policy. Otherwise, China is going to do the same thing what the colonials used to do against the colonies: divide and rule, carrot and stick. And if you want to suffer, you can continue to do like this. Otherwise, you all will have to come together to challenge China's hegemonistic, because China is not talking only about China. Now they are talking about global initiatives on every major issues. So China's ideological thinkings will be imposed on the rest of the world. So is this something that we want to see? We Tibetans have experienced that, and we don't want China's hegemonistic ambitions prevailing all over the world. If this is something we don't want to see, then we have to collectively work together. And thank you all very much for expressing your support and solidarity with the Tibetans, Uyghurs, Taiwanese, Hong Kongers, all the people who are suffering under China, and all the repressed people who are also represented by the ONPO representation here at this conference. I'm sure other ONPO members will also have the opportunity to network with members who are present here. Thank you. Undersecretary Azra Zaya, she was our special coordinator for Tibetan issues. And I also want to inform you that the present dispensation has also decided on a special coordinator for Tibetan issues, because last time during the first Trump presidency, it came on in the 4th year. We are happy that it's coming in the 2nd year itself. And we hope to work with many countries. But again, as Senator Powell said, human rights issues are also a big concern in the free world. So this is something we need to really think about and see how we should be an example for others, but not become an example of repression to other authoritarian regimes. Then there is no difference between authoritarian regimes and the free world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kongwa Sikyong. I request Kongwa Sikyong to present a small memento for our guest of honors as a gesture of thanks and appreciations.
One group photo, and then we wait for change. Come closer. Thank you. Don't leave your voice.
Thank you so much. We will now have a 20-minute coffee break.